she will be speaking to us about the impact of diversity. Now, to give you a little bit of background on Pheona before she joins me on stage, she's had an incredible experience that involves both resilience and perseverance, because Pheona is the co-founder of Radiant and Brighter, and actually Pheona, along with her husband, spent 5 years out of work after a mistake with their resident paperwork. Now, during that time and through that experience, they went on a huge learning curve. So together they started Radiant and Brighter, and they provide BME individuals with personal and community support. So when Pheona talks to us today about the impact of diversity, she'll be speaking from a background where the team are all about increasing and promoting opportunities for minority groups and individuals, and they're expanding cultural awareness within local communities. Pheona and her team are all about making a huge impact to the people and the businesses that they work with. Radiant and Brighter have formed very strong partnership with brands like Taylor & Wimpey, Marks & Spencer's, and the Centre Stage. They're also supported by the Hunter Foundation and by the Scottish Government. So I'd like you to give a big warm welcome to our next speaker, Pheona.
Hi everyone. So my name is Pheona, and before I do anything, I'm just going to ask you to do an exercise, and I hope I can actually see you. So unless you are not able to, would you please stand up, everybody? Now, diversity is about discomfort, but discomfort is good because you grow. So prepare to be a little bit uncomfortable. No, you'll be fine. Remain standing if you have a person of color in your leadership decision-making team. Remain standing. Remain standing if you know a person, anybody that is visibly of color and is in the public arena in Scotland. Okay? And the last question is, remain standing if you know the difference between an asylum seeker, a refugee, and an immigrant. Remain standing. So we have 3 people. Do we have a microphone? We have 3 people, and I'm going to ask you the question. And one of you is going to tell us what an asylum seeker is, the other one is going to tell us what a refugee is, and the last person is going to tell us what an immigrant is. So, to you, lovely lady here.
Okay, so an asylum seeker is someone who has moved from one country to the other because they are in some way persecuted or in their own country.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Remain standing because you have a gift coming to you. Next person. That lovely lady. What is a refugee?
A refugee is someone who comes from another country into another country because they are trying to move nation, whether or not that is because they're seeking some kind of asylum or because they're just trying to move because of better circumstances.
What's the difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee then?
I want to say it is someone seeking asylum is someone that has a palpable reason that they are in danger in their other country versus when they're just coming over to seek a different life.
And the refugee?
That's the problem, is it's almost her exact answer. I feel like I should have sat down.
No, you still get a gift. But an asylum seeker is still seeking asylum. You don't actually get permission to reside in the UK just because you're seeking asylum. But to then get refugee status, you have to have been believed and accepted as a true asylum seeker. That means you have proven beyond reasonable doubt, beyond doubt really, that you are worthy of being given asylum. So you get residence permit as a refugee. Okay, thank you very much. And the last person.
So I would say an immigrant is my personal story.
Fantastic.
I'm Portuguese myself, with a father who's from Angola. And we moved to Scotland in 2008 at the height of the economic crisis. I was 12 back then. We came for the purpose of a better life and better work opportunities. Eventually, over time, Scotland became my home, and I relate to the Scottish culture much more than the Portuguese culture itself. So I have a lot to thank for Scotland, and I decided to stay after my studies to give something back as well.
Thank you very much. We share a story. Right, so I came to Scotland in 2007 after living in London for 10 years. As you had previously from my story, we were not allowed to work at the time due to the fact that we'd filled in the wrong application form and therefore had been refused residence. I had been in the UK 10 years and I thought, that's it, I've arrived, we're going to buy a house, it's all going to be good, and it all changed. In the 5 years, when we got here, the first shock was the realization that our lawyer had never had not attended court when we were supposed to attend court, because we'd hired one and expected to go challenge the situation and hopefully get residence. We got to Scotland and thought, you know, this lawyer, he's being evasive, he's being strange, and so what do? Try and find another lawyer, only to discover our court case had been in May, we didn't show up, he didn't show up, and therefore it was now September, and we were now undocumented migrants. We had 2 children. I had a husband who's standing at the back there, and I also had a pregnancy for 7 months, and because of that situation, I did not see any medical personnel for the first 7 months. Perhaps that describes why we have the most bubbly youngest child. And then we realized it was difficult, it was challenging circumstances, but we quickly realized we were not the only ones. We were undocumented, but there were refugees, there were asylum seekers, there were lots of immigrants that were sharing the same experience. And so my husband, who doesn't sit down, decided to go start volunteering. And as he started to volunteer, we then set up an initiative that reached other migrants, and we started to work together. Well, skip on ahead, and in 2012 we got our residence permit, and we're like, yay! It's been difficult, we were not allowed to work in the 5 years, now we can work. But it doesn't work like that. And the reason it doesn't is because, one, we were immigrants. See, when you've been in that situation for that period of time, you know that you're just an immigrant. The system says it, the media says it, the Scottish people say it, and you hear it in the words of why did you come here? And everything screams at you that you are not worthy and you have no value here. And you believe it, you internalize it, and you see yourself as just an immigrant. And I did, and my husband did. But when we got to that stage and we couldn't find work, it was worse because we had been unable to work for a period of 5 years, which is another issue that comes into play when you're looking for work. So what did we do? What any immigrant would do, we set up Radiant and Brighter. We decided we'll do this and we'll support other people just like us to find work. We couldn't find work, but we're going to support others to find work, set up business and understand the systems and structures. But something that we didn't know was coming came to us during that period. And it was the realization that Scotland is welcoming, but the systems and the structures and the processes do not say that. They don't say that in not just the immigration process, but they don't say that in the workplace. So the interview processes and everything around you does not say you are welcoming. Now, where I come from, in Uganda, when we want to welcome you into our house, you get in, we serve you a buffet, mandazi, chapati, cake, matoke, everything on the table. Now you Scottish people cannot even say no to that because you're too polite. You don't say, I don't like it. You say, that was interesting. We say that, you don't. But in Scotland, when you get here and somebody welcomes you into their home, they give you a cup of tea, they give you a biscuit, perhaps a tablet, And then they say to you, would you like your tea with milk, without milk, strong, light, and all those questions which say to you, you are welcoming. The systems don't do that. They say to you, you are all welcome. We welcome refugees and we want you here. But then when you look for work, you can't find it. When you want to set up a business, you hit the barriers. After you've set up a business, you start to get questions that need you to validate whether you can be trusted. And so I stand here saying to you, we need to start talking because you cannot change what you cannot acknowledge. We need to talk about diversity. You need to understand that if you cannot call me black, well, brown, maybe caramel on a good day, are you suggesting there's something wrong with black? We need to talk about color. So we started to speak about color, and we started to speak about ethnicity. When we speak about diversity, all the other forms get spoken about, but ethnicity we shy away from. Well, I'm giving you the permission. I am diversity. Well, a bit of it. So you can speak about it. And so we do diversity training, and we talk about issues around diversity and ethnicity. And we create that space to question and to try to think about it. And so my situation then led to us supporting Marks and Spencer's. What Marks and Spencer did was they came to us and said, look, we need a bit more diversity. What can you do for us? And we said, well, we can bring you the people, you can interview them, and they will pass. Well, 7 people went for the interview and they all failed. And Marks and Spencer, we were too scared to even speak to the manager, but we called and said, well, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to say, but this is what's happened. And the manager said, well, if they failed and you thought they were good, what was wrong with that? What happened? We went back, looked at their interviews, looked at their systems, and it turns out their interviews were not inclusive and understanding of the cultural differences. The questions they were asking could not let people in the way that they wanted to. And that led to us supporting 90 people over the past 2 years into Marks and Spencer's as a company. But more than that, one of the guys that failed the interview then passed the interview. All 7 of them passed the second time round. And one of them was filmed by a customer who was so thrilled by his service, and the video went viral, and Marks and Spencer got free marketing, 7 media outlets and newspapers in 5 countries. So what does diversity bring? It brings value. But you need to understand, you need to know that actually diversity brings value. How are we going to know that? We need to talk about it. So in your workplace, in your community, I say to you 3 things. 1, if you don't have a friend, a person, a colleague of color, ask yourself why and ask the people around you. Okay, that will make a difference. And don't tell me you can't make a difference, because where I come from, again, we say, if you think you're too small to make a difference, then you haven't spent a night with a mosquito. So you can't do it. When you get there, create a space where you can talk about color, you can talk about ethnicity, because if you can't speak about it, you can't change it. The 3rd thing I'm going to say to you is, start to think for yourself and create an opportunity to meet a person of color. Because you see, you internalize things that you don't even know you've internalized, but the moment you meet somebody different to yourself, you will start to see something different. As I did when I came to Scotland, because I thought all white people are rich, all white people are smart, all white people are kind. And they are all those things, but there are other things too. They're just like me, a brown, a black, a caramel person. And so when you go back, think about those 3 things. And I'll leave you with a quote, one of my favorite quotes. And it says, I think the last speaker spoke about it, if you want to go first, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. So if you are looking for change and you don't know where to start, don't you tell me we are hard to reach. I am here, you can contact me. Come with us and we'll do you good. Thank you.
thank you so much for sharing so much about your own personal journey, and then also I think for challenging us as a group and as individuals to go back and really have difficult conversations, because that's what they are. So I want to kind of kick off the questions by asking you, if we're in agreement that diversity is strength, in the same way that impact is at our core, if diversity is at our core, how do we start those actions that you asked us to take? So if we go back today and we start having conversations about colour and about diversity, where do we start?
That's a good question. Where do you start? I think you start from where you were. So if you, in your workplace, perhaps you have never spoken about colour, but you can start by saying, why do we not have a person of colour in our workplace? Or why do we not have a decision maker that is of colour in our workplace? And then contact, for those organizations, businesses, you are able to contact organizations that have people that work with minority ethnic groups, such as ours, but there are others as well. And try and consider doing things slightly out of the box. So one of the things that we do, we run a women's group, and it's been phenomenal, but the reason it's been good is because we pair up women from the BME communities with women leaders in Scotland. And what we do is we pair up people from different backgrounds of ethnicity. So they learn from each other, and we don't call it mentor-mentee, but it is mutual mentorship, because we can all learn. So in your head, first and foremost, you've got to understand that I have something to learn from every single person. And then you need to think, what value do they bring? And start off with that, then have the conversations. And then speak to organizations, perhaps speak to people who are doing work in that area. One of the challenges is that we just speak to ourselves and we're comfortable with our own, but you need to get out. You need to be uncomfortable and speak to people who are not like you.
So I like that idea of innovating and thinking outside of the box, exactly like we do for our core business, in the same way about how we approach our teams and growing our teams. And I wonder, what would you say to the challenge of, you mentioned it in your talk, but I just can't find people. Do you hear that a lot? And what do you want to say to people when you hear that?
Yeah, I do hear that a lot. I can't find people, they are hard to reach. I think that's just lazy. I think it's lazy because you can't find people if you look out. If you go out of your own circle, you can find people. But I also think that embedded in that statement is a real fear to actually make that progress, because we find it very difficult to acknowledge that we don't have diversity. One of the challenges we had is one of our children went to high school, and in their very first 2 weeks they experienced racial abuse from their fellow children in high school. And then when we went to the school and we said, oh, here is an issue, we want to talk to you about it, they said, oh, but we're a very diverse community. As if diversity means that you have sorted it. You need to get out, you need to meet people, you need to get out of your comfort zone, you need to research as if you were researching for something important. Because we know that diversity drives innovation. We know that diversity drives productivity. In fact, and also we need to think, what exactly do we want out of it? FSB have just done a research piece which we were involved in, and for the very first time in Scotland, that research shows, it's the very first research that's been positive, in my perspective, in my view, of the migrant in Scotland. And it shows that 1 in 10 businesses are founded by migrants. Those businesses contribute 13 billion to Scotland, and 100,000 people, more than 100,000 people, are employed by immigrants. Therefore, you can't say we are hard to reach, because we are somewhere there. You just have to get out of your comfort zone.
And what I'm hearing you say there is that we have to be deliberate about this diversity and about change. So in the same way that we set KPIs and we have matrices and we have meetings to talk about our business goals, if we're to take diversity seriously, then we need to have KPIs, we have to have deadlines to meet, and we need to be able to open open our businesses in that way.
Yeah, and right now businesses are going global. I mean, you might be in Uganda and you need to understand how we do business in Uganda. So we need to really realize the value that it brings and start to look at what, from that perspective, start from a value base. Don't start from let me try and help or sort something out. It is about value to your business and to your company and to your communities.
So at that stage, I would love to open it up to the floor for questions for Pheona. So if you can raise your hand if you have a question, we'll make sure and get the mic to you. If we can start just there at the back, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi again. I've got a question specific for Uganda.
Yes.
What are the trends that you see of young people going through university, and what professions are they taking up in the coming years, for example?
That's a very interesting question. In Uganda, we have an education system that was left us by the colonialists in 1960 something. And that is very much white collar. Children still think I should be a lawyer, I should be a solicitor and all that. But then there is a new trend. Actually, Uganda is one of the most entrepreneurial countries right now. And we have a lot of people coming up as entrepreneurs. So young people are starting to challenge that and starting to say, actually, I want to set up a business because there are no jobs anyway. And so we're starting to see a push into other areas such as entrepreneurialism and other things such as art and things to do with building houses and the construction area. Thank you.
So you mentioned early on that there was these applicants that were failing the Marks and Sparks sort of process. I'm curious what kind of questions were alienating the population and how you adapted them.
So one of the questions that, bear in mind, these people had either just learned English in the past few months and they had probably never been in Marks and Spencer's, but they wanted a job. And where I come from, when you do an interview, you showcase how good you are, how educated you are, how qualified you are. And here, they want to know, what do you think of my company? Do you like my company? And we're like, what? Your company? I'll find out when I work with you. So one of the questions they were asking were things like, so if we didn't have Mara, what would you give the customer? Like, what is that? I don't even know what cucumber is. What are you talking about? So the questions just didn't mean anything. So it's those kind of questions that were very centered to the actual organization, but these people didn't know the organization. And even if you trained them for a year, they still wouldn't know. So we started a process where they understood the values. We worked with Marks and Spencer, we trained them, we got them in the store to kind of have an experience of the actual organization, and then they did the same interviews, and this time passed very highly.
Back to our friend. And then up at the front.
So the thing about the interview process, I've actually found from experience and from talking to friends and consulting with other people, is that the way interviews are carried out just now are also harmful for nationals or Europeans. Corporates are not extracting the appropriate information and the useful information from the people due to their processes.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because one of the other things is that if we know, communities can be quite small, and if migrants know that organization, their interview process is too complex and everything, what goes around? And then we're like, we don't, about ethics, we're talking about impact here, we're like, oh, that organization is not quite a good one to work with. But also, the challenge is that you don't then bring in innovators. You do not have the opportunity to bring in people from outside. You remain a homogeneous group, and research shows that the more homogeneous you are, the more challenges you have looking outside of yourselves. Because if you're in a box, you cannot see what's outside the box.
So just our final question down at the front here, thank you. That's great.
Thank you for sharing your story, that was amazing. What your organisation does sounds incredible. I'll have to find out more about the Financial Mentorship Programme. So in terms of entrepreneurs, companies or organisations you work with, are they putting a path to your door to take you up on this, or do you find there's still a big education piece to get out there and do it? What they could genuinely be doing to be genuinely diverse?
That's a very, very good question, because we have organizations that will come to us and say, or companies that say, we actually want diversity. But the real appetite for diversity requires a change of thought process and the way we work. And it's not easy when you've been doing things a certain way to then say, actually, we need to change that. So it's difficult for companies to rethink their processes and to change them. So we do quite a lot of, in our diversity training, we do quite a lot of critical thinking and rethinking what you want to do. So we have some companies that come to us, absolutely, this is what we want to do, like M&S did, and then we have some that say, we want diversity, and then they're like, oh, is it a person of color? Wait, let's think about that a bit more. So it's both, but we will make progress. The last thing that I will say is that we need to acknowledge once again that actually we need to make progress. In the Igbo saying, and I'm not Nigerian, but in Igbo they say that if a bird flies off the ground and lands on an anthill, it's still on the ground. So we need to acknowledge by all means the progress we've made, but we also need to acknowledge it might still be on the ground.
So a big thank you to everyone here for engaging so much, and a huge thank you to Pheona for her talk this afternoon. So we've got great news now. We've had a fantastic morning. The sun is still shining.